Hi, this video is going to cover lesson 3.8, numbers 2 and 4. If you want different problems, check out a different video with different homework problems. What we're going to do is number 2. It says find all complex solutions. To do that for this question, it is set equal to 0. We're going to go ahead and we're going to factor. In fact, we're going to pull out the GCF, which they both terms have an x in common, and they both have a factor of 2 in common. So we're going to pull that 2 and that x out to the front, and what's left over, well, 2 divided by 2 is 1, and x to the third power divided by x is x squared. So just to check that working backwards, we have 2x times x squared makes 2x to the third power, minus, and then 2 times what makes 4, and that would be 2. And if we already have this making 4x, we don't need any more x's. So I'm just going to close this up, and we have factored. According to the zero product property, this 2x right here is multiplying this factor of x squared minus 2, which means we're going to set 2x equal to the 0. We're going to set that equal to 0. Or it could also be the factor x squared minus 2 is equal to 0. And therefore, to solve this equation, I'm going to go ahead and change a few colors here. We're going to divide this equation by 2. We're going to divide this side by 2. And x for this equation turns out to be 0. And over here, when I go ahead and add 2 across, that means that x squared turns out to be positive 2. I'm going to change colors one more time. We're going to have to cancel out a square with a square root. Now, I also want to point out that this means there's 2 answers. There's a degree of 2, which means this problem has 2 solutions. I'm going to go ahead and square roots, and whatever I do to one side, I got to do to the other. But I also have to use plus and minus. So that means for this half of the equation, the answer is going to be plus or minus. And since you can't break down the square root of 2, the answer is going to be plus or minus the square root of 2. And you have just now found all 3 solutions to this equation. I'm going to go ahead and write out the word solutions. And we're going to say the solutions to this equation are, we found 0, we found the square root of 2, and we found negative square root of 2. And just to check to make sure that we found all the possible zeros, complex, that was the question, complex means you could have real, you could have imaginary. Well, we have a degree of 3, and we found 1, 2, 3 of the zeros. And that completes problem number 2. Now I'm going to move it forward, and we're going to take a look at problem number 4. In problem number 4, there are 1, 2, 3, 4 terms, and it's equal to 0. We're also going to try to factor on this one, and to start factoring, we're going to try to do a little grouping here and see if that works. I'm going to group the first 2 terms and the last 2 terms, leaving a plus sign in the middle. The greatest common factor, the first 2 terms, they both share at least x squared. So we're going to pull out an x squared. What's left? Well, there's going to be a 5x minus, and the only thing left in this one is that 1 right in front. So we got to put a 1. All right, the next one, you can pull out a 2, and it's going to be a positive 2. What's left over? 5x minus, and the only way you're going to get that 2 back again is if you put a 1 here, because 1 times 2 makes 2. And all that's set equal to 0. Out of these 2 terms, you now notice that 5x minus 1 and 5x minus 1 are the same. That is the greatest common factor of this polynomial again. So we're going to go ahead and write 5x minus 1. And now we're going to figure out what is left over when you factor out 5x minus 1. Well, you're left with x squared, and you're left with a plus 2. Now all of that is still equal to 0. And since, again, the zero product property says that either the factor 5x minus 1 has to be equal to 0, or x squared plus 2 has to be equal to 0. And when you solve these equations, I'm going to move the minus 1 over to the right side, which will become positive 1 on the right side. We will divide this equation by 5, and one of the solutions turns out to be 1/5. We also have this equation here, which has 2 solutions to it. So I'm going to go ahead and move the +2 to the other side, which means it will turn to a -2 when it's on the right side. I'm going to change colors here just to make it nice and neat. We're going to now take the square root of both sides. But to do the square root of both sides, you're going to have to do plus and minus. So x equals plus or minus. Now, I want you to notice what we have now. We have not the square root of 2, but the square root of -2. Remember, this negative right here means you're taking the square root of -1. And the square root of -1, by definition, comes out as I. And the only thing left under the square root sign is the number 2, because we can't break it down. And therefore, we have 3 solutions to this problem. We have, and I'm going to go ahead and write out the word solutions again. And our 3 solutions are 1/5. We have I square root of 2. And we have -I square root of 2. And just to check to make sure that we have all of them, come back up to here. The highest degree was 3 of this whole polynomial, which means it has 3 solutions, and therefore 1, 2, and 3. And we found all of them. And that completes these 2 questions for lesson 3.8. Check out other videos for different questions for 3.8.